Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be reviewing episode 4 of Titans Season 4, Super Mart. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I regularly post reviews of films, books, and movies here. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. To date, I've released 3 books, The Women in White, The Lethal List, and most recently, Textbook Murder. All of them are on sale now, and there are purchase links in my video description below. With that in mind, and without further ado, welcome to my spoiler-filled review of Titans Season 4, Episode 4, Super Mart. We get a flashback to 1996 set beautifully to the song Season of the Witch, where May Bennett is a woman who works a desk job in a high-rise building. She already has unspecified magical powers, but she's using them for nice purposes, fixing a printer and reviving a dead plant in her office. May's male boss finds her and shouts her head off in a scene of sexism and workplace harassment so over the top that it's so obvious that this guy is being built up as an unsympathetic victim for May to kill later. Surely enough, the guy's tirades against May cause her to briefly lose control of her powers and accidentally mind control the boss into committing suicide by jumping from a window. May, however, loses her own job, the 4th time that this has happened in a year, and she heads to a bar to forget. At this bar, she meets Dr. Adamson, the creepy scientist and villain from the organization back in Titans Season 1. Adamson tells May about the organization, which he says cultivates the potential in special individuals. Complimenting May's rare talents, Adamson tells her that sometimes the brightest lights come from the darkest places. Adamson gives her a card with the word Azarath, Metreon, Zenthos on the back, that chant again. Adamson gets May to say the words, then he disappears, just as May begins to feel something different inside. The flashbacks fast forward a year. May and a friend named Gina, whom viewers recognize as the witch who murdered the factory workers last episode, are at a facility run by the organization when Adamson visits them again and tells them that Trigon wants to meet them. This is an extraordinary thing, as Trigon has apparently never met any of the organization's other girls before. It's pretty unclear though just what meeting Trigon would look like, because he couldn't even come to planet Earth until Raven brought him there at the end of Season 1. Also unclear is whether May and Gina even do meet Trigon, because the flashbacks accelerate by another month. May and Gina are now blindfolded and standing in front of a large hole in the ground alongside several other women. Adamson orders the whole group to trust Trigon to catch them and to take a leap of faith into the hole. May and Gina are the only ones who actually go for it, though what happens next is once again left ambiguous. May and Gina are then seen climbing out of the hole on a ladder. Gina wants to give up on the climb, but May encourages her on. Eventually though, Gina admits that she wants to be Trigon's queen, but says that there can only be one. She elbows May and knocks her back down into the hole. Yet again, this episode goes the route of maximum confusion when it cuts to Gina in a church setting, dressed for a wedding and standing in front of a nice cake that looks like it's been touched up with blood. May shows up later on, having apparently climbed her way out of the hole a 2nd time. May seems to forgive Gina for pushing her and takes a place next to Gina. Adamson comes in with a chalice of blood and says that Trigon was impressed with both Gina and May, but was most impressed with May. Trigon is accordingly giving May the chance to bear the child of his prophecy. Adamson offers May the chalice, and May drinks the blood before apparently becoming immediately pregnant with Trigon's child. Back in the present, the moon has somehow turned red in the sky above. Dick and Corey discuss what to do with Sebastian. They determine pretty fast that May most likely wants him for unknown reasons and probably was not going to kill him at the police station. Corey mentions her vision from while she was petrified, but Dick refuses to believe that that vision holds any significance. Dick does, however, admit that there are very eerie parallels between Sebastian's story and Rachel's. Both of them have non-familial guardians who died. Both were framed for murders that they didn't commit. Both are being pursued by creepy and esoteric individuals with inexplicable powers. Ironically enough, Sebastian is even wearing hooded clothing now, just like Rachel did back in season 1. While Dick and Corey talk, Rachel offers Sebastian some company. They start to bond as Rachel asks him what May wanted from him. Sebastian tells her that he's hardly able to sleep, and he's been hardly able to sleep lately. Due to strange feelings inside of himself, he says that May wanted for him to repeat 3 words. He starts to mention the Azarath Metreon Zenthos chant, but Rachel stops him before he can speak the last word. Somehow, someway, Rachel recognizes those words as being the chant of the organization, which completely contradicts season 1 because the organization never used that chant back then, so Rachel shouldn't recognize it now. Even so, Rachel tells Dick that she believes that the organization is behind the New Blood murders and wants Sebastian. Dick is insistent on believing that the organization was destroyed in the asylum fire during season 1, but he agrees that the Titans should go back and check out the site of the asylum just to make sure that it's still abandoned. This part of the story honestly made no sense for 2 reasons. First, why would Dick believe, either now or in season 1, that the organization was destroyed just because one asylum was burned down? We were told in season 1 that the organization was a worldwide cult with agents everywhere. Just because one asylum that they owned was destroyed doesn't mean that every organization agent died inside of the building. Second, assuming that the organization was back in play, why on earth would Dick believe that they'd all have just stayed behind and rebuilt in the same exact asylum spot that was destroyed in season 1, as opposed to moving on and rebuilding someplace else? Just guy. Some of the writing on this show is so terrible sometimes. Anyway, the Titans, Sebastian, and Jinx make a road trip in the RV to visit the site of the burned down asylum. As they go, Rachel, Corey, and Gar fill Tim, Sebastian, and Jinx in on the whole Trigon organization plot from season 1. Sebastian is clearly haunted on hearing about Trigon and how Trigon was planning to destroy Earth. When the Titans, Jinx, and Sebastian get to the site of the burned out asylum, it turns out that the place is now a Super Mart, though it doesn't register on Dick's GPS. Despite how ordinary the place looks, it basically looks like a knockoff version of Walmart and a super center. Rachel and Gar notice a mass of ravens that are circling a certain spot around the back, so the group heads there and finds a suspicious entrance to an underground area. May and Gina watch as the Titans, Jinx, and Sebastian go into an underground area. They view them on security cameras, and Gina seems very much against the idea of the Titans being allowed down there. May, however, wants for Sebastian to learn the story of his own destiny. Gina mentions that all of the Titans are in this story, but that Corey might not like her part in it. May says that no one can change his or her destiny, only for Gina to tell her that they did, which May discounts as being only because the two of them are stronger. May then tells Gina that there are quote-unquote old friends who have been waiting for this day, waiting to return when ordered to do so. She then uses her magic staff to call upon the so-called Hounds of Hell to rise up because it's time. When May uses this spell, several workers at the Super Mart grab an array of home and gardening gear and armor up with it before heading down after the Titans into the underground facility. The Titans, Sebastian, and Jinx know nothing about any of this though, as they descend further into the underground area and eventually split up. Corey, Dick, Sebastian, and Raven go one way, everybody else goes another way. More flashbacks to the year 1997 reveal that the pregnant May eventually gave birth to a boy named Sebastian. But the organization's prophecy clearly stated that a girl would be the one to bring Trigon into the world. So Sebastian was quote-unquote removed. And when May protested and insisted that Sebastian could fulfill the prophecy, she was locked up below the asylum. Another little aside here, I'm sorry, but the timeline for Sebastian's birth just does not add up here. I know that this show tends to play fast and loose with the age thing, but there's just no way that I'm buying that Sebastian Sanger, as presented here, is in his mid or early 20s. You can literally see the lines and the gray hairs on this dude in some episodes. Aesthetically speaking, he could not have been born in the late 90s. Anyway, the flashbacks accelerate by about 18 years. While May was still locked up, she was invited by a male member of the organization to renounce her so-called blasphemy that Sebastian was the child of the prophecy. The guy said that if she did that, she could just rejoin the organization. But May refused, leading the guy to use a snake to torture her. The flashbacks accelerate again to the middle of Titans Season 1, which we are told by captions happened in 2019, even though Season 1 was released in 2018. When Dick and Corey started the fire that destroyed the asylum, it supposedly killed everyone and destroyed everything on the level above ground, but touched nothing that was below ground. This allowed Gina to sneak below ground and free May. She and May left, and May was even kind enough to help the guy who tortured her escape also. They get out with a remnant of the organization members who also managed to survive the fire, and it's then implied that May organized the survivors and Gina into a new cult, a new version of the organization that was built around worshiping Sebastian instead of Rachel as the child of the prophecy. In the present, Dick, Corey, Sebastian, and Rachel find May's prison and deduce that the asylum fire provided cover for the escape of whoever was imprisoned down there. Corey finds a creepy fairy tale book that was left behind by the organization that depicts a child of prophecy who opens a hole in the sky, who heralds Corey's death by having her throat slit, and who apparently also heralds the deaths of the other Titans. There are a bunch of other creepy images in the book, like a white bearded guy that don't quite make sense. Sebastian finds a picture of May and Gina that was left there and recognizes Gina as his next door neighbor. Dick then guesses that the new organization has been surveilling him for quite a while. Tim, Connor, Jinx, and Gar meanwhile go on their own search, during which Jinx teases Connor about how Superman is afraid of magic, how Superman probably left the galaxy to avoid dealing with the magic-related deaths going on in Metropolis, and how she believes that Superman is probably one bad day away from being evil himself. Eventually, Jinx and the others find a series of tapes that basically tell them the same story that the flashbacks told the viewers. When the Titans and Jinx and Sebastian get back together and Dick's group hears the tapes, Sebastian has a breakdown because he realizes that he was meant to be evil, but doesn't want to be evil. Rachel tries to comfort him. Jinx alone suggests just killing him now to prevent May and Gina from getting to him. Dick and Rachel strongly tell her that she will do no such thing. Gar, however, points out that he's already checked into it and that the red moon in the sky will only last for about 8 more hours, meaning that as long as Sebastian is kept out of May's hands for that period of time, she won't be able to use him in whatever scheme that she has planned. I mean, I guess she'd likely be able to use him once the next red moon rolls around, but that's something that's never really discussed in this episode. Before the Titans can leave, they are set upon by May's so-called Hounds of Hell, which turn out to basically be ordinary supermarket workers who have apparently been zombies this whole time. Needless to say, this is one of the episode's more disappointing twists. I tell you, there are times where this show's bull-headed insistence on going the route of least CGI and least spectacular storytelling is just plain annoying, and this is one of them. I mean, relegating the forces of hell to unassuming supermarket workers, major misstep. These guys don't even have the classic raggedy zombie clothes, for goodness sake. Speaking of going the route of least spectacular storytelling, Connor could very easily take out all of these zombies in seconds with his heat vision or super strength, but this is Titans, and the fighting must be kept on a hand-to-hand, largely non-supernatural level, so he doesn't do that. Instead, he basically struggles alongside everyone else with holding the zombies off one by one. Jinx deduces pretty fast that the best way to kill the zombies is to just take off their heads. Rachel does this to one zombie with a chainsaw. Jinx then uses magic to freeze the zombies in place, which she says will only last for a few seconds. She and the Titans take that time to rush into another room and bolt the door, only to realize that they've been led into a trap and that a zombified Deathstroke is in there with them. Deathstroke starts firing at them all with a rifle, and they all take shelter while Connor uses his body as a shield against the bullets. Dick tells Jinx to freeze zombie Deathstroke, but she says that using that power requires recharging. Sebastian has another breakdown and tries to offer himself up to Deathstroke so that the others can escape. Connor, however, gets him back down, and Rachel talks him out of sacrificing himself. For some reason, Dick doesn't want Connor to fight zombie Deathstroke alone, but Connor manages to convince Dick to let him do it. Connor then punches Deathstroke's head right off, only for Deathstroke to just reattach it and keep attacking. It then becomes a total mystery why beheading apparently works on some zombies but not on others. Connor tries to punch Deathstroke again. Why he won't just use heat vision to incinerate him instead, I don't know. Probably because the writers didn't want to dip into the CGI budget again. Anyway, Deathstroke avoids Connor's punches and stabs Connor with a knife that makes him bleed. It is yet another of this episode's great mysteries why that worked, why stabbing Connor worked. It could be argued that because zombie Deathstroke was brought back to life with magic, Connor had no immunity to damage that was dealt by him, except that that doesn't make sense because none of Deathstroke's bullets worked on Connor, and none of the other zombies' attacks did either. Dick creates a smoke screen and fights Deathstroke so that the others can get away, which they do. Deathstroke nevertheless beats Dick up and escapes. And in one of this episode's inconsistencies, Deathstroke captures Sebastian off-screen. Deathstroke gets Sebastian into a van and prepares to drive off with him, only for Jinx to reveal that she magically shapeshifted into Sebastian. She then freezes Deathstroke in place and uses a hairpin to stab him through the eye, which, according to her, permanently kills him so that he won't come back. Why this works, once again, I have no idea. Maybe Jinx's hairpin is a magic item as well, one capable of undoing zombie magic. Maybe it's not. We may never know. The Titans and Jinx get Sebastian to Bernard, who takes them all to some sort of Star Labs safe house that is secure enough to repel attempts by even Superman and John Constantine to get inside. Bernard takes Sebastian to a chamber that's sealed off from the rest of the place and lets him in. Rachel asks to join him, and both Bernard and Sebastian allow it. Connor, meanwhile, is suffering the ill effects of being stabbed. Gar notices and asks him if he's okay. Connor says that he is and just needs the bathroom. When Connor gets to the bathroom, however, he vomits up blood into a toilet, and some of that blood takes the form of a snake. Connor later rejoins the team, only for Gar to again ask him if he's okay. Giving nothing away, he says that he's right as rain, which honestly should be a neon sign to Gar that he's not. Dear goodness, no one who's actually okay talks like that. The end. So here are my thoughts. First, the good. My favorite part of this episode, I think, was the way that it, and by proxy this whole season, has gone about slowly, methodically redeeming Season 1's terrible Trigon story. I have long maintained that Titans Season 1 was a dumpster fire and an underwhelming shadow of what a proper Trigon story should look like. Ironically enough, it was Season 4 of the iconic cartoon Teen Titans TV show of the early 2000s that I believe did the best Trigon adaptation that has ever been put to screen. This season of Titans has been far from perfect, but it has been a vast improvement over the other 3 seasons of Titans, as well as a very nice sort of re-version of Season 1 that corrects most of that season's worst mistakes. Unlike in Season 1 of Titans, in this season, the superhero horror elements are on point, but are never so bombastic or so cheap-looking that they make you laugh. Unlike in Season 1, the Titans this season actually feel like the Titans and are mostly true to their comic book characters. Unlike in Season 1, this season's story makes sense. I could go on. And this episode in particular brought some closure and even some reality to one major story thread that was left dangling at the end of Titans' first season. One of the biggest head scratchers from Season 1 was the idea that Trigon controlled a global cult of followers, but that cult seemed to just disappear after the Titans escaped the asylum building and burned it down with some of the cultists still inside. This season finally plugs that plot hole a little by implying that those other cultists are still out there, but have just been radicalized into May Bennett and Gina's version of the Trigon prophecy, with Sebastian at the center instead of Rachel. Although I guess it's still up for debate if May or the others actually know that Trigon is already dead and that Rachel killed him at the top of Season 2. For the 3rd week in a row, Sebastian really steals the show here. If Season 4 is a better version of Season 1, then Sebastian really is shaping up as a better written version of Rachel. Some of that is probably because Joseph Morgan has literal decades of acting experience on Tegan Croft, but much of it is a matter of the material. Joseph has been consistently given some stereotypical, but still very focused and compelling material this season, as opposed to the more scattershot approach that the writers have been taking with Rachel since the start. It doesn't make sense how the Titans all jump to the conclusion that Sebastian, not Rachel, was the child of the organization's prophecy after reading the dark fairy tale book. I mean, most of them were there for Season 1, when the organization kept insisting that the child of prophecy was Rachel, and when Rachel was the only one capable of releasing Trigon. But that plot hole aside, Sebastian comes off here as totally sympathetic as a character. He's so screwed over by the world and so desirous to do the right thing and so soul-crushingly devastated when he realizes that he was apparently born to be bad. It's even more soul-crushing for the viewer because we all know that he will eventually break bad, and that it's truly just a matter of time before the sweet and misunderstood man who dreamed of bringing people together will become the enemy. Given that we're on episode 4 now and that episode 6 is titled Brother Blood, it's a pretty safe bet that Sebastian's villainous turn is coming up pretty fast, and it'll be interesting to see what tragic twist takes Sebastian that way. Connor has been on something of a roller coaster trajectory this season, occasionally getting good material and good action and occasionally being placed on total back burner, but I like the whole twist with him at the end of this episode. I'm not sure exactly where that's all going, but it's clear that he is seriously messed up right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if May and Gina end up using him and whatever is going on with him as their Trojan horse for breaching the secure area where the Titans are hiding out. Okay, now the bad. This episode's internal logic, simply put, was severely lacking. Now yes, I said this in my review of episode 1 and it bears repeating here. I get it. This is Titans and I've been with this show since season 1, so I know the rules. This show's writers enjoy a very casual relationship with the story's own canon and with logic itself. The number of times that this show has either retconned or just plain ignored its own canon by now has to number in the dozens. Being a fan of this show requires not just a suspension of disbelief, but also a suspension of reality. It's been that way since the beginning, and people who enjoy this show put up with it as the price of admission. Said and settled. Even so, I feel like the biggest of the logical inconsistencies in this episode bear at least mentioning for review purposes. I touched on most of them in my recap, so I'll just hit the major ones here. First, near the start of this episode, Rachel acts like she knows the Azarath Metreon Zinthos chant is bad news and associated with the organization from Season 1. But to my knowledge, those words were never spoken during that season by the organization or anyone else. So there's no way that Rachel should have been able to piece together from hearing Sebastian say the words that Mae Bennett was associated with Trigon or the organization. Second, this was a major plot hole even back in Season 1, but it gets brought up again in this episode. Why ever did the Titans think that burning down the asylum in Season 1 meant that the organization was completely destroyed? The Titans knew then that the organization was a global cult with spies everywhere, not just in one crappy building in the middle of nowhere. Third, Dick's bullish railing against the idea of magic or dark prophecies in this episode just seems so illogical for him, given everything that he's seen thus far. Dick was there for the Trigon arc of Season 1, so he should know that the organization is serious business by now. He should believe in the veracity of the organization's dark prophecies, or he should at least believe in the possibility of their veracity. It felt like the writers regressed him to the role of the reluctant skeptic this episode, just so that there would be at least one. The entire Deathstroke thing was really out of left field, and this episode honestly would have worked better without it. For one thing, it didn't make sense in the context of what Mae Bennett was doing. She said, or at least strongly implied, that she was reviving men and women who had been part of the organization and who had essentially been awaiting the order to rise again. But Deathstroke was in no way associated with the organization, so it made no sense for him of all people to come back. And he didn't really add anything to the episode either, except the obligatory shock value. My last major issue with this episode is pretty much a resurgence of an issue that I voiced in my review of last episode, that being the nebulously defined, confusing, and often self-contradictory way that magic is portrayed here. Like I said in my review of last episode, telling a compelling magic story requires establishing the rules and the exceptions and the consequences early on and sticking to them. That way the audience doesn't get confused and the logic doesn't contradict itself. Yes, I get that magic is unpredictable and unrealistic in fiction, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have rules and logic of its own. It's not supposed to be chaos for the sake of chaos. Nevertheless, that's exactly what we got in this episode. The Titans writers have done a good job of building up the mystery of the Church of Blood conspiracy, but a horrible job of explaining the rules behind the various forms of magic that get used in the story. Outside of one little note from Jinx to Connor that magic is basically a contest of wills, we've thus far gotten no real explanation regarding the rules of magic this season at all. That failure became increasingly noticeable over the first 3 episodes, and it's at its worst in this episode. Jinx can apparently freeze people in place with magic sometimes. When she does, though, she has to recharge for an unspecified and plot-convenient amount of time. Connor is vulnerable to magic. Deathstroke was brought back to life as a zombie by magic, so his knife works against Connor, which makes some sense, except that Deathstroke's bullets don't work on Connor for whatever reason. For that matter, other magically resurrected zombies with weapons don't seem to be able to hurt Connor at all. All of the supermarket worker zombies who were brought back to life by magic can be neutralized by having their heads taken off, but for whatever reason, that solution will not work on Deathstroke. For whatever reason, it takes stabbing him through his good eye with Jinx's hairpin to kill it. And there's really no explanation of what makes Deathstroke different from the other magically resurrected zombies. These are just a few of the majorly confusing twists and turns that the magic use took this episode, and it was just so frustrating. Again, I get it, magic is unpredictable, but still, there is logic to it, even in fantasy stories, and failing to establish any real common sense behind the magic depicted on screen continues to be a major problem on the part of the creatives behind Titans. Okay, down to brass tacks. This episode had strong moments, the positive payoff on a lackluster Season 1 storyline, the material with Sebastian, and the ending with Connor being the main three. And this episode does a good job of setting up major developments right around the corner, most notably Sebastian's descent into madness. But this episode ultimately fails under the weight of its own logical inconsistencies, the underwhelming Deathstroke return, and the sloppy depiction of magic and its effects. I give Titans Season 4, Episode 4, Super Mart 2.5 cronuts out of 5. At any rate, tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, and please ring that bell. So long.